We are coming to you live with the most serious escalation warnings yet in the U.S.-Israel war against Iran. Tonight, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has publicly designated every U.S. military facility, hideout, port, dock, shelter, and logistics node inside the United Arab Emirates as a legitimate military target. This is not a vague threat. This is a formal name declaration that American personnel and assets on Emirati soil are now in the crosshairs if the United States continues strikes on Iranian strategic assets, most recently the devastating attack on Kharg Island, the single most important oil export terminal in the entire country. At exactly the same time, Iran has launched yet another large-scale ballistic missile barrage toward Israel. Multiple projectiles were detected inbound toward Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and surrounding central districts. Air raid sirens have been screaming across the country for the past several hours. The Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow 3 systems have been firing almost continuously. Intercepts are lighting up the night sky over major population centers. We have early reports of impacts, shrapnel damage in residential neighborhoods, fires started by debris, people injured while rushing to shelters, and search and rescue teams already moving into affected areas. Jerusalem has reported explosions audible over the old city. Tel Aviv has seen missile contrails directly above high-rise buildings and crowded streets. This is not a one-off retaliation. This is Iran methodically demonstrating that it still retains the capacity to put Israel's largest cities under sustained missile threat, even after 2 weeks of some of the heaviest bombing campaigns the region has ever seen. Let us begin with the Kharg Island operation and why it has provoked such a direct threat against the UAE. Kharg Island is not just another facility, it is Iran's primary oil lifeline, the loading point for up to 90% of the country's crude exports when operating at full capacity. When President Trump announced on Truth Social that U.S. forces had totally obliterated every military target on Kharg Island in what he called a powerful bombing raid, he was describing one of the most consequential single strikes of the war so far. The Pentagon followed up with a brief confirmation that the operation targeted military infrastructure on the island, but did not elaborate on damage to civilian export infrastructure. Iran's oil ministry insists that loading operations continue and that any disruption is temporary. Independent satellite imagery analysts, however, are already reporting significant craters, destroyed support buildings, and at least partial damage to several loading arms and storage tanks. Trump accompanied the announcement with a renewed warning: if Iran keeps firing on commercial vessels in and around the Strait of Hormuz, oil infrastructure will be next. That sentence alone sent shockwaves through energy trading floors worldwide. Iran's answer came within hours. The IRGC released an official statement addressed directly to the government and people of the United Arab Emirates. It reads in part, "The presence of American forces on UAE soil makes every U.S. hideout, port, dock, military shelter, and logistics node inside the Emirates a legitimate military target. We urge UAE residents living near these sites to evacuate immediately to avoid civilian casualties when the time for response arrives." This is the clearest and most public threat Iran has issued against a Gulf Arab state since the war began. Until now, Tehran has mostly confined its Gulf-related rhetoric to tanker attacks, drone strikes on energy facilities, and general warnings about Hormuz closure. Naming U.S. bases and facilities inside the UAE as legitimate targets changes the equation. It means Iran is prepared to treat American troops and aircraft stationed at Al Dhafra Air Base, Jebel Ali port facilities used by the U.S. Navy, and other logistics nodes as active combatants rather than protected guests on Allied territory. The UAE hosts one of the largest concentrations of American air power in the Middle East. Al Dhafra is home to F-35s, F-22s, MQ-9 Reapers, refueling tankers, and special operations aircraft that have been actively supporting strikes inside Iran. Any Iranian missile, drone, or cruise missile attack on those bases would almost certainly kill American service members and trigger a massive U.S. retaliation, potentially against Iranian soil or even against IRGC command nodes inside Iran itself. That is exactly the ladder of escalation both sides have been carefully climbing and descending for the past 2 weeks. Iran wants the United States to feel that every additional strike carries a real, immediate cost. The United States wants Iran to understand that broadening the war to U.S. allies or bases will bring overwhelming force in return. Now let us turn to the ballistic missile attack on Israel that is still unfolding as we speak. The IDF's Home Front Command activated Sirens across a wide area from Ashkelon in the south to Haifa in the north, but the heaviest concentration has been over central Israel, Tel Aviv, Rishon LeZion, Ramat Gan, Herzliya, and Jerusalem. Residents report multiple waves, at least 3 distinct salvos separated by 20 to 30 minutes each. The projectiles are described by military sources as medium-range ballistic missiles, likely from the Fateh 110 family or newer solid fuel designs that are harder to intercept because of shorter boost phase and flatter trajectories. Israel's multi-layered air defense network has been working at high intensity. Arrow 3 exo-atmospheric interceptors have engaged missiles at the edge of space. David's Sling has handled mid-course threats. Iron Dome has mopped up shorter-range rockets and debris. The sky over Tel Aviv has been filled with bright flashes and sonic booms for much of the night. Despite the high interception rate, the IDF is claiming over 90% successful engagements. Some warheads have gotten through. Early damage reports include shrapnel impacts on apartment buildings in Bat Yam and Holon, south of Tel Aviv. A fire started by debris in a commercial area near Herzliya, several light injuries from panic, falls while running to shelters, and minor shrapnel wounds. In Jerusalem, loud explosions were heard over the city center. One missile appears to have been intercepted directly above the city, raining fragments onto rooftops and streets. The psychological impact is enormous. Israelis have lived under missile alerts for years, but the combination of sustained barrages, targeting of economic hubs like Tel Aviv, and the knowledge that Iran is still able to launch after losing so much of its missile infrastructure is wearing on the population. Meanwhile, Israeli retaliatory strikes inside Iran continue without pause. In the past 24 hours, the Israeli Air Force has conducted multiple large-scale waves against Tehran and western provinces. Targets include remaining IRGC command centers, ballistic missile storage caves, air defense radars, and regime security headquarters. Dozens of F-35s, F-15s, and F-16s have been involved, dropping JDAMs, Spice Glide bombs, and other precision munitions. Thick black smoke has been visible over several districts of Tehran. Iranian state media admits limited damage, but insists most strikes were intercepted or missed their marks. The Pentagon briefing today was unequivocal. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the U.S. campaign is ramping up and proceeding on plan to defeat, destroy, and disable all meaningful Iranian military capabilities at a pace the world has never seen before. He cited dramatic reductions. Iranian ballistic missile launches down more than 90%, one-way drone attacks down 95%, naval presence in the Gulf essentially eliminated. Yet he acknowledged that sporadic missile barrages and asymmetric attacks, including the Kharg strike response and the UAE threat, show Iran still has fight left. The Strait of Hormuz remains the economic center of gravity. Iran has effectively turned the waterway into a shooting gallery. Tanker transits are down sharply. Multiple commercial vessels have been struck, boarded, or forced to anchor. Insurance premiums are at historic highs. Some major oil companies have declared force majeure on loadings from Iranian ports. The IRGC Navy continues to warn that any tanker destined for the United States, Israel, or certain European countries is a legitimate target. Oil prices are reacting accordingly. Brent crude has traded in a wide range, dipping briefly after reserve releases, but climbing again on every new threat. The market is pricing in persistent risk, even though the United States has drawn 172 million barrels from its strategic reserve, and the International Energy Agency has coordinated 400 million barrels from member countries. If the IRGC carries out attacks on UAE-based facilities or further disrupts Kharg loading operations, we could easily see prices push back toward $120 and beyond. President Trump has maintained a consistent line. The war is way ahead of schedule. Iran's military is virtually destroyed, but we don't want to leave early. He has threatened even harsher measures, including potential strikes on power infrastructure, while simultaneously issuing limited waivers on Russian oil cargoes already at sea in an attempt to take some pressure off global fuel prices. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has called for total national unity and vowed that the country will not surrender. The IRGC has repeated that U.S. forces in the Gulf are now legitimate targets unless their bases are closed or operations cease. This is no longer a contained air campaign. It is becoming a multi-domain war of attrition. Airstrikes, missile exchanges, naval harassment, oil market disruption, proxy threats, and now explicit warnings against the territory of a major U.S. ally. The next few hours and days are critical. Will Iran follow through on the UAE threat with a symbolic or real strike? Will Israel respond to tonight's missile barrage with another deep wave into Tehran? Will the United States escalate naval escorts through Hormuz or conduct additional strikes on remaining Iranian oil assets? Every move carries the risk of pulling more countries into active combat. We will stay on this story continuously. Our team is monitoring open source intelligence, official statements, shipping trackers, market feeds, and air raid alerts in real time. For everyone living under sirens in Israel tonight, for families near U.S. bases in the UAE, for workers on tankers in the Gulf, and for civilians across Iran under bombardment, our thoughts are with you. This is Global Insight News. We'll be right back with more updates. Stay safe.